The Argo Dawn cut through the choppy waters of the Barents Sea like a rusted blade. The vessel, old but stubborn, groaned beneath every wave, her steel bones creaking from years of hard labor. Captain Elias Voss stood at the bow, his gloved hand gripping a cigarette as the wind tried to tear it from his lips. Smoke curled around his beard, and his eyes, pale and sharp, scanned the horizon with a hunter's patience. They'd been out at sea for 12 days. Fuel was running low. Morale was worse. The crew, 6 men, hardened and hoarse from salt and silence, were running on fumes and stale coffee. The net haul had been poor, barely enough to justify the trip. Voss needed a miracle, or at least a damn good catch to make port worth returning to. At 3:47 a.m., the sonar pinged something strange. "Got movement?" grunted Even, the quiet one manning the sonar. "Deep, real deep." "How deep?" Elias asked, already on his way down to the deck. "Over 7,000. It's rising." The crew stirred like dogs catching the scent of blood. Everyone had stories about the deep, about things that swam below sonar range, about shadows longer than tankers, and lights that moved like they were alive. No one said those stories out loud, though. Not here. Not now. The net was lowered. 30 minutes later, they felt the winch strain, cables whining with effort. The boat tilted slightly starboard. The thing in the net was heavy. Too heavy. "Jesus Christ, it's bending the frame," yelled Kaz, the deckhand. Salt water sprayed as the winch groaned. Something thrashed below, slow and massive. And then it broke the surface. What they pulled up was not fish. It was a mass. Grayish flesh wrapped in thick, barnacled armor, pocked with what looked like gills and strange, bioluminescent nodules that flickered in and out like failing bulbs. It was partially coiled, like a sleeping eel, but the exposed length was easily 30 feet. Its skin steamed in the cold air. Blood, if it was blood, dripped black and syrupy onto the deck. "What in God's name?" muttered Elias, stepping closer. It had an eye. Not large, not dramatic, just an eye. Open, staring, cloudy but very much alive. Then came the sound. Not from the creature, but from everywhere. The radio, the intercom, the speaker used for announcements. A low-frequency hum, rising into a whisper that slithered down their spines like cold oil. "I was awakened for you," the voice said. The words didn't belong on a ship. They didn't belong anywhere. Elias backed away, slowly. The others were frozen. Kaz was whispering a prayer, and Ivan had dropped to his knees, eyes wide, staring at the thing in the net like it was a god or a curse. The eye blinked. Only once. Then the whispering stopped. The deck fell silent again, save for the distant, eternal crash of the waves. Captain Voss lit another cigarette with a trembling hand, and from somewhere beneath the ship, deeper than the sea should go, something stirred. The creature was too large to store, too strange to throw back. They wrapped it in chains and secured it to the starboard deck, covered it with a tarp that bulged like it was hiding a second hull. No one argued. No one spoke much at all. Captain Elias Voss the horizon from the bridge, fingers wrapped around a thermos that had gone cold hours ago. The sea was unsettlingly calm. Even the wind, once a constant shriek across the deck, had gone quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He hadn't told the crew what he'd heard over the radio. The whisper, the words. Maybe they heard it too. Maybe no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Captain Elias Voss watched the horizon from the bridge, fingers wrapped around the thermos that had gone cold hours ago. The sea was unsettlingly calm. Even the wind, once a constant shriek across the deck, had gone quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He hadn't told the crew what he'd heard over the radio. The whisper, the words. Maybe they heard it too. Maybe no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Below, in the galley, The men ate in silence. Kaz poked at his food like it might buy him back. Tomas, the ship's mechanic, chain-smoked with a shaking hand. Even hadn't spoken since they hauled the thing up. Just stared off, muttering softly in Russian when he thought no one was listening. That night, the ship's dog, a mutt named Brian, half husky, half mystery, began to whine. Then bark, then growl. He sat outside the tarp, tail stiff, teeth bared. He wouldn't move, not even when Tomas tried dragging him away. "It's just a big fish," Tomas muttered, not convincing even himself. "No fish ever blinked like that," Kaz said, and it's still breathing. "Look at the tarp." It was. Every so often, it rose, then fell. A slow, horrible rhythm like something dreaming. Captain Vos finally broke the standoff, grabbing Brian by the scruff and pulling him back toward the cabins. But the dog fought him the whole way, eyes never leaving the tarp. When they reached the door, Brian stopped, rigid, and let out a low, guttural growl, teeth bared at the sea. Then, silence. A crackle came over the ship's PA system. Elias froze. He hadn't touched it. No one had. Then came the voice again. His voice. "I was awakened for you." Elias staggered back, knocking over a stool. He reached for the mic, pulled the plug, yanked the power. The voice kept speaking. Not just through the PA now, but over the handheld radio, the weather scanner, even the emergency beacon. All dead channels came alive at once, repeating the same line, calm, patient, as if reciting a fact. "I was awakened for you." Elias stumbled into the control room, heart pounding. He switched everything off, one by one, until the ship went quiet again. Outside, the tarp shifted. The deck creaked beneath something impossibly heavy. Elias looked out through the fog glass of the bridge. There were no stars. Just black above, black below. And deep in the dark, beneath the lull of the calm sea, something moved. Not quickly, but slowly, intentionally, like it had just noticed the Argo Dawn and was beginning to rise. By morning, the air smelled wrong. It wasn't just the usual stink of fish and rust and diesel. This was sweet, cloying, like rotting fruit left to bake in the sun. It clung to the throat. It made breathing feel like swallowing something alive. Tomas was the first to notice the black ooze. He'd gone topside to check the anchor cables, trying to keep himself busy, pretending the last 24 hours hadn't happened, that they hadn't hauled up something that bled tar and whispered through wires. The tarp was soaked through. A dark, syrupy fluid was leaking from beneath it, spreading across the deck like oil, except it hissed when it touched metal. Small patches of the steel floor beneath it were beginning to corrode, fizzing like acid eating through bone. He backed away slowly, and that's when the tarp moved. Not from the wind, not from the ship rocking. It twitched, like something spasming under muscle. Then something tapped beneath it. A rhythmic knock, like fingers on wood, ... Thomas ran. Elias Vos stood at the helm again, watching the horizon. The world still refused to move. No wind, no current. The Argo Dawn was drifting through a glass sea, and the sky above was dull and colorless, as if someone had forgotten to paint it. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it. The eye, the way it blinked. The voice. He kept the ship's radio off now, but that didn't help. The whispers had moved inside his head. They came at odd moments, while shaving, while pouring coffee, while staring out into nothing. "We see through you. The gates are open. I remember your name." Voices like rust, like bones grinding against steel, and they knew things. Things no one should know. One whisper came in the voice of his dead brother. Another in the tone of a woman he hadn't seen since the war. Elias gripped the wheel tighter. He knew madness. He'd seen it up close. This wasn't it. This was invasion. Below deck, things were unraveling. Kaz had taken to reciting prayers under his breath, the same one, over and over. Yea, though I walked through the valley, even had stopped speaking entirely. Just sat in the engine room with the lights off, staring at nothing. Sometimes he scratched something into the walls with a screwdriver. Symbols, spirals, lines that didn't connect. And Brian, the ship's dog, was missing. One moment he was on his leash outside the captain's quarters. The next, the leash was frayed, chewed through, and the hatch to the upper deck was ajar. They searched for him. They found the leash soaked in the black fluid. They didn't find the dog. That evening, the whispers changed. They weren't just voices anymore. They were chanting, a deep rhythmic pattern that echoed through the hull. It made the screws rattle. It made Tomas scream and punch the wall until his knuckles bled. The crew gathered in the galley, the creature still chained to the deck above them, its fluids leaking through the steel. The lights flickered. The chanting stopped. Then the ship tilted slightly to port. Something had moved in the water, something big. And on the wall, beside Ivan, etched into the rust in a perfect circle, were 6 words no one remembered writing. He isn't here yet. I am. The next night came fast and wrong. No sunset, just a sudden fading of light, like someone had flicked a switch and the world forgot how to glow. The Argo Dawn sat stranded in still, ink-black water. No stars above. No moon. The sea looked like tar, and the sky like ash. Elias Voss hadn't slept in 2 days. His eyes were bloodshot, veins twitching under skin that had grown pale and cold. He kept muttering to himself. Notes, reminders, prayers. He couldn't tell anymore. Every time he tried to rest, he dreamed of the creature, not just seeing it, being it. Swimming blind in the pressure-crushed dark, ancient bones wrapped in flesh older than memory. Thoughts that weren't thoughts. Hunger without language. Waking up gasping, coughing seawater onto the floor. Tomas cracked first. He kicked open Elias's cabin door around 3 a.m., shirtless, soaked, his eyes wrong. Dilated and glassy like he hadn't blinked in hours. She was there, Tomas said, smiling. In the water. She called my name. Who was? Elias asked. My daughter. She's 6. Drowned 2 years ago. But she's out there. He pointed out the porthole. His hand was trembling. She wants me to come home. She forgives me. And before Elias could stop him, Tomas ran. He was over the railing before anyone made it to the deck. A splash. A scream that turned to laughter, then silence. They searched the waters for an hour. They found his boots floating near the hull, soaked with black fluid. Inside the left one was a strand of seaweed, twisting, impossibly long, etched with tiny symbols like bone carvings. Later, Kaz began humming. He hadn't spoken since Tomas went overboard. He just walked the ship, slow and steady, humming a lullaby that none of the crew recognized, but felt like they should. It echoed strangely, as if bouncing off invisible walls. Then he started talking to Brian. The dog was gone. Everyone knew that. But Kaz would crouch on the deck, cooing into the darkness, whistling, and reaching into the shadows. He's hiding, Kaz said, smiling. He's scared of the big thing, but he says it's okay. It won't eat us. That night, Kaz curled up beside the tarp. Elias considered dragging him away, but something moved beneath the chains. Something that made the deck bulge, like the creature had grown, like it was unfurling. He left Kaz there. Even was the quietest. He never joined the others anymore. He stayed in the engine room with the lights off, carving into the steel walls. Elias checked on him once, just once. Even had covered the bulkhead in spirals, eyes, and patterns that looked like they moved when the light shifted. When Elias asked him what they meant, Even just smiled and said, "He's dreaming of us." Elias tried one last time to reach land. He powered the backup radio, bypassed the main systems, rerouted every connection. The signal finally went through, static, then a faint voice. Argo Dawn, this is Coastal Control. What is your situation? Elias's heart pounded. We need evac. We pulled something from the trench. It's alive. The signal cut out. A new voice came through. You should not have called. Not a whisper, not a threat, a statement. And then the sea began to rise. Not as a wave, but as if something beneath it was breathing. The Argo Dawn creaked. Lights flickered. From the galley, Kaz screamed. When Elias ran in, the wall was covered in water. Not wet, not leaking, just covered. Like the sea had found its way inside the metal. And in the reflection, Elias saw a city. A massive, drowned city beneath the ship, impossibly deep. Towers of coral and bone. Lights like eyes, shapes swimming between the spires. Then the reflection was gone, just metal again. Just him, alone. That night, someone whispered from the deck. Elias went up, weapon in hand, flashlight flickering. Kaz was gone. The chains were broken. The tarp was empty. And in the blackness ahead, just past the railing, something vast and luminous began to surface. Not the creature they'd pulled up. Something else. Watching, waiting, waking. Morning never came. The ship's clocks kept ticking, but the sky above the Argo Dawn remained locked in an eternal pre-dawn bruise. The sea was black glass, still, watching, like it had pulled the vessel into some kind of graveyard dimension. Captain Elias Voss sat alone in the bridge, eyes fixed on nothing. He hadn't spoken since Kaz vanished. There were no birds, no waves, no wind, only the occasional groan of the hull, as if something beneath the water was brushing against it, feeling its shape, measuring its weight. Even finally emerged. His face was different, paler, eyes sunken, but calm, too calm. I've seen it, he said. In the engine heat, in the rust, in the shadow beneath the screws. It's not a creature. It's a vessel. A vessel for what? Elias asked. Even smiled, whatever was waiting. They'd returned to the deck together. The tarp was gone. The chains were shattered like they'd rusted to powder. But the creature, its carcass, or what was left of it, remained sprawled out across the steel. Except now it was open. Something, or someone, had cut into it. From within, its belly was split, wide and yawning, as though something had hatched. Inside were rows of what looked like ribs, but they pulsed slightly, not bone, more like ivory coral, slick with brine. Threads of black muscle still twitched, reflexively, as if the thing had only just died. At its center was a void, a cavity filled with fluid that shimmered like mercury. Even leaned close to the wound. Elias pulled him back. You touch that, you die. Even looked at him like a child disappointed by a parent. It's not death, he said. It's return. They sealed off the deck, tried to. It didn't matter. That night, the creature's remains bled again. Black ichor spilled down the stairs, hissing as it hit the generator. Sparks flew. The ship lost power. Every bulb on board popped in a burst of heat and smoke. Darkness fell. True darkness. The kind where your heartbeat sounds too loud in your ears, and the air feels thick. And from the bowels of the ship, below even the ballast tanks, came a scraping sound, wet, rhythmic, climbing. Elias grabbed the emergency flashlight and made his way down. Even followed, silent, humming that same lullaby Kaz had once hummed. They reached the bilge hatch. It was already open. And there, dragging itself up through the floodwater, was something wearing Tomas's face. But wrong, stretched, hollow-eyed, the skin too smooth, too shiny as if dipped in resin. Its mouth didn't move, but a voice filled the corridor. He sent me back to prepare the way. Elias didn't wait. He slammed the hatch, locked it, and backed away, heart hammering in his chest, but even didn't move. He stood staring at the hatch, whispering, "It's only the firstborn. The father sleeps beneath." Back in the bridge, Elias checked the sonar. The screen pulsed once, then again. Something massive, colossal, was beneath them. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It just was. It spanned miles, wrapped in rings, its shape impossible to comprehend. Not a creature, a gate. The offspring wasn't the monster. It was the key. Elias stared into the radar until his eyes burned. Then he heard the voice again. "You brought it up. You fed it your dead. You gave it names. Who are you?" he whispered. The voice answered from inside his skull. "We are the memory of the sea." The first wave didn't come from the sea. It came through the airwaves. Elias was back in the bridge, the backup batteries keeping the radar alive in short, sputtering pulses. He hadn't slept, even hadn't moved. He just sat in the corner, humming lullabies to the open wound of the thing they pulled up. Then the radio hissed. Dead static, then voices. Not one, thousands, screaming, whispering, chanting. Foreign languages, dialects that hadn't existed in millennia. Some too guttural, some too wet, like lungs speaking underwater. And then, clearer than all of them, came news. This is not a test. Multiple coastal cities report black tides moving inland. Boston, Lisbon, Dakar, Nagasaki. The sea is rising inland. It's not a tsunami. It's something else. People are disappearing from the shoreline, eyes in the water. Do not approach the signal cut. Then came the chant again, in unison worldwide. The father stirs. Elias collapsed into the captain's chair. He finally understood. They hadn't found the creature. They'd unlocked it. The thing on their deck, its offspring, was a signal flare broadcast across the dark matter of the ocean. The moment it surfaced, it called home. Not to a mother, to a god. Or what used to be one. By morning, the water around the Argo Dawn was changing. It churned now, slowly at first, then in spirals, like something enormous was breathing just beneath the hull. The steel groaned. The sonar pinged irregularly, depths shifting without explanation. Sometimes it claimed the ocean was 12,000 meters below. Other times it said 0. Then something surfaced in the distance. A tower, not of metal or stone, but shell, twisting, barnacle-encrusted, reaching skyward like a jagged, spiraling tooth. As it rose, it screamed, not from inside, but as if the air itself was being flayed. Elias watched through binoculars and saw people on it, not alive, not drowning, standing, waiting, mouths open, eyes glazed white, like they'd been there forever. Even spoke for the first time in hours. Every 100 generations, the sea demands a tithe. We forgot, so we were reminded. He smiled, then opened his mouth to show that his tongue had turned black. It's in us now. Back in the lower decks, the black fluid had returned, pouring up through drains, leaking from pipes, weeping through rivets. And in it, movement, shapes, limbs too long, faces too flat, like things still learning how to wear people. Elias sealed the doors, but the metal screamed as it warped. There was no more ship. There was only passage. One final message came through the distress beacon. Do not approach vessel Argo Dawn. IT is nitrogen monoxide, longer understood to be in this world. All contact has resulted in loss of self. And beneath that, a strange, wet transmission. Something not meant for human ears. But if you played it backward, cleaned up the static, and listened at just the right moment, you could hear Elias's voice, repeating a single phrase. It's awake, it's awake, it's awake. The ship was no longer floating. It was suspended, held aloft by unseen currents or tendrils, gently rocking in place as if being cradled. From above, the Argo Dawn still looked like a vessel. From below, it was a coffin. Elias strapped a flashlight to his chest and pried open the hatch to the sublevels. The air reeked of salt and meat. Water sloshed somewhere deep, but the smell wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the sound. Voices. Not screaming, not chanting. Whispering, pleading, familiar. His mother, his brother, a lover long gone. All of them murmuring from the dark, speaking truths they couldn't possibly know. You were never meant to survive this long, Elias. He descended. The lower levels of the ship were wrong, bigger, warped. The layout didn't make sense anymore. He turned a corner expecting the engine room, but found a hallway of slick, glistening walls, pulsing like throat tissue, and the walls were breathing. In, out, slow, steady, welcoming. Every step he took, the temperature dropped. He could see his breath now, frosting in the air. But the walls were wet, not freezing, but fevered. Then came the door, a bulkhead that hadn't existed before. Covered in carvings, circles, eyes, spirals, teeth. One single word scratched over and over in languages old and new. Remember. He pushed it open and found the womb. It wasn't a room. It was a chamber. Massive, round, with no visible source of light, yet everything glowed in deep, bioluminescent greens and blues. Tentacles of seaweed floated through the air like they were underwater, and in the center, a cradle, grown from coral and bone, shaped like a nest. And inside, something vast, coiled tight like a sleeping fetus. Slick with birth fluid, tendrils of shadow slithering around its limbs. It wasn't the same creature from the deck. This one was formed. Humanish, but too long, too pale. Its mouth stretched ear to ear, lined with rows of teeth that clicked softly as it breathed. Its eyes didn't open, but twitched as though dreaming. And next to it, even, kneeling, smiling, eyes hollow. "He's almost ready," Ivan whispered. Elias raised the flare gun, but the creature spoke without opening its mouth. "You fed me your blood. You cracked the seal. You sailed where only Leviathan dreams. Now I remember. Now I return." The flare fired. It hit the thing in the chest. No fire, no pain, just a scream, not of agony, but of birth. The womb split open. A torrent of water exploded from the chamber, dragging Elias down into an impossible trench that should not have existed inside a ship. The walls around him peeled back into open ocean, and he fell back into the sea. As he sank, arms limp, lungs burning, Elias saw them. All of them, the children of the deep. Pale silhouettes swimming just beyond reach, some with faces, some without. All watching, all waiting, and further below, a shape that had no shape, vast. Sleeping Leviathan, not dead, not moving, but there, wrapped in chains of flesh and time, coiled like a god waiting to wake. And the child they brought aboard, just its heartbeat. Elias blacked out, and when he woke, he was on the deck again. Alone, the ship was quiet, but the ocean hummed beneath. The sky no longer held stars, only eyes. The sea forgot its shape. Tides pulled in every direction. Shorelines collapsed inward. The maps, satellites, sonar, instruments, lead. Whole islands vanished. The Mariana Trench bled. The Gulf of Mexico cracked like glass. And something beneath moved. The world noticed, but too late. They said it appeared in the Atlantic first. A scar that opened the water from seabed to sky. Not a wave, not a vortex. A void. And from that wound came sound. A low-frequency hum that turned blood to ice and shattered eardrums in a 100-mile radius. Ships vanished. Planes dropped. Whales breached and never returned below. And then, At the center of the scar, a spire rose. Not stone, not metal, bone. A single tooth, a mile wide, jutting skyward, carved with the names of every drowned soul the ocean ever kept. News anchors didn't last long. They broadcast as long as they could, until their eyes turned black and they began to speak in tongues no one wanted to understand. Not even them. One final broadcast from the BBC cut through the panic. This is not an extinction. It is a baptism. On the Argo Dawn, Elias stood at the bow, alone. Even was gone, left with the child below. The ship no longer floated. It waited. The ocean wasn't water anymore. It was memory. Alive and thick, responding to breath, to thought. Waves moved before he did. The sky no longer held clouds. Just that deep twilight glow, eternal and watching. And beneath him, he felt it wake. Not in movement, but in presence. He looked to the horizon. They were coming. Other ships. Derelicts. Rusted cargo freighters from decades past. Missing from the manifest for years. Fishing boats from ghost stories. Naval vessels from wars no one remembered. All drawn here. By blood. By the child. By Leviathan. The sea opened. Not up, down. And from its yawning core rose something that didn't rise. It simply became visible. As if the ocean had always been its skin. As if the sea had pretended to be water this whole time. Mouths, eyes, rings of teeth, layers of scale. Its body stretched beyond the horizon. It moved, and the sky tilted. Cities flooded from the mere shift of its mass. Elias fell to his knees, eyes locked in awe and terror. Not because of what he saw, but because of what he remembered. Somehow, in that moment, he knew. This was not the first time. This had happened before. It would happen again. The sea doesn't forget. Only people do. And then, the voice. Not in his ears. In everything. The covenant is broken. The waters return. Flesh to salt. Thought to current. Sky to wound. The child had opened the door, and Leviathan stepped through. Elias wept, not out of fear, but because it was beautiful. The stars blinked out, one by one, like eyes closing for sleep. And from the ocean's final breath, a chorus rose. We remember. We return. We are. The deep